Yo, Sleepy Sheepy here. Today we're looking at the patch notes and we're also going to be doing some gameplay with patch 1.12, and this is going to be the pre-patch before the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC drops. So real quick, we're going to look through just kind of the general themes of this patch. We're not going to go through every single point just because there's a ton here, and I strongly recommend that you read through this on your own. But I think it's just kind of worth looking at as a whole, and then just we're going to talk about how it feels in-game as we go through some duels and invasions. So obviously there's added support for Shadow of the Erdtree. That's not a big surprise. There's going to be some new summoning pool features, some new map features, new hairstyles, which is cool. I have helmet on most of the time, but it's good to know that they're there. Also some inventory features. It sounds like you'll be able to potentially invade only in the DLC areas. That might be a nice feature. I think a lot of people would be happy about that. But we're going to kind of breeze through this and get over to the PvP exclusive balance adjustments, which is very exciting. So first one, the build up for Madness and Sleep. This can happen normally once, but then after you get procced, then you will have kind of immunity to it for a period of time. So I don't know how long that period is, but it means that you can't really get infinited by sleep pots or madness procs. Like if you're playing against a group of 3 and everybody's running Unendurable Frenzy, I've definitely run into a situation like that, and it's terrible. You just get madness, and then you get hit with it again, you get madness again. So that change is very welcome, and honestly just a great quality of life change. Increased poise damage for some attacks against other players of the following weapon type. So this is going to be pretty nice because great swords and a lot of these other great weapons and colossal weapons, it means that you can't just kind of continuously mash into each other. So that's a huge change, something that people have been asking for a long time, and we just really like to see that. Adjusted poise damage of some dual wield attacks against other players by the following types. So great swords, axes, great axes, hammers, halberds, reapers. So I believe this is just kind of a buff to the great swords and the dual wield moveset. We'll kind of have to play with that to get a better understanding of it because it just says adjusted poise damage. So not totally clear, but kind of the overarching theme is that the great class weapons are a little bit better now. Power stance weapons are worse now, and the just kind of light class weapons like a regular straight sword is not as good just due to the poise damage that they do. So they're not instant poise breaks anymore. However, axes, hammers, halberds, and reapers are instant poise breaks. So this really brings to the forefront the idea of like an offhand hand axe meta, which I've messed around with, and the hand axe is just very, very strong. And we'll get into more details about that later on too. So we do increase the poise damage of axes against other players, so that's cool. We like to see that. Axes getting buffed is definitely neat. Decrease the damage of dual wield attacks against other players, so that's the nerfed power stance damage. This means power stance straight swords, power stance great lances or great spears, those getting nerfed is cool. I like to see that. They're still strong, but they're not quite as devastating as they used to be, and I think that just kind of helps kind of create a little bit more variety in the playstyle of the game. So I'm very happy to see that in general. We're also going to see a decrease in poise damage of some other attacks against players of the following weapon types. So daggers, straight swords, thrusting swords. This is the nerf that I was talking about to some of the lighter classes where they don't instant poise break guaranteed. So I believe the poise break value is pretty high. So I think it's like 117 poise and you still get poise broken, but it's, not 133 plus. So this means that if you are running pretty intense armor, then you're not going to get poise broken, but a lot of people still will. And this makes me wonder if like a 117 poise break point is going to be the new meta, but we'll see. There's definitely a lot more data and testing that needs to come. We also see a decreased poise value of some attack motions against other players. So again, just changing the poise for the great swords and colossal swords. Decrease the damage of some attacks against other players for heavy thrusting swords. This is something that's strange to me. I'm not sure why they're nerfing heavy thrusting swords at all. And we've seen this before with patches from Software where they will nerf heavy thrusting swords, and maybe they mean to be just nerfing thrusting swords, because heavy thrusting swords aren't really a problem. They've never really been a problem. And so it seems weird to adjust them like the thrusting sword crouch attack got nerfed pretty hard, but really everybody wanted the just regular thrusting sword crouching attack to get nerfed. So yeah, I don't know if they're just trying to cover their bases for all thrusting swords or if they genuinely see a problem with those, but yeah, I like heavy thrusting swords, so that's a little bit of a bummer to me, but that's okay. We also see the decreased damage of dual wield attacks against other players for spears and great spears. So again, PS spears, not as deadly as it once was. And then decrease the damage animation motion of the following weapon types. So for fists and claws, when the player is stunned by a two-handed heavy running attack. So basically they got rid of the true combo where you could do a running heavy followed up by another heavy attack, and that would true combo into each other, which was pretty broken on fists and claws. So I'm not too upset about that. Decrease the effects of the Baldachin's Blessing. That, you know, I don't use that ever, but it's probably a welcome change, and I think, you know, as the game ages, having that be adjusted in the long term is good. Now we go into the Ash of War adjustments. So we have decreased damage for Spinning Slash, that's huge. Flaming Strike, that's huge. Rain of Arrows, decreased damage as well as poise damage. Great change. Basically, we're getting a lot of nerfs for Ashes of War that are just super strong, so I think that's all super nice. Transient Moonlight, decreased damage, amazing. I wouldn't mind if they decreased the poise damage as well. I think that was a change that I liked, and then they reverted it, so that's okay, but we'll see how that plays out. And then decrease the poise damage on Spear Call or Ritual means that the Death Ritual Spear hopefully won't just like combo you over and over again if somebody just keeps, you know, spamming that Ash of War. Murdan's Rain and Rain of Arrows both got nerfed a bit, so similar to how Rain of Arrows was a little bit broken, similar to the Spear Call Ritual, just that type of attack, they're nerfing the poise damage, which makes sense. And then Spinning Weapon, decreased damage animation motion when stuns other players. So I'm not sure that was much of an issue, but we see it there. These are both huge. I'm super happy about these. The Black Flame protection is not as strong as it used to be, and Bestial Sling does less poise damage, which is great because it comes out super, super fast. And then we have some general balance adjustments. So the adjustments for the speed of turning with dual wielding heavy thrusting swords. So I feel like that was pretty bad before, so maybe it's improved, because the tracking was terrible on PS thrusting swords, but nobody really runs that, so it's not super big of an issue. They increased dexterity scaling when assigned Ashes of War with corresponding weapon affinities, so this will be interesting. I think something like just some Ash of Wars that are keen affinity. Like on the Arumi, I would normally put Beast Roar, which gets great scaling with Dex already. So I think for a keen infusion on a S scaling weapon, that will be pretty huge and pretty high damaging. So we'll see about that. Increased stamina consumption when guarding against the following weapon types. So we have great swords, curved great swords, great axes, and great hammers. I'm cool with that. Don't guard that much, so I think that's probably good. It nerfs shields a little bit. We get increased speed from axes, great axes, hammers, flails, reapers, so that's awesome. Just increasing the speed of those things is always a welcome change. I think all those weapons could be a little bit faster. I wouldn't be upset about that. It is missing greatswords, which is kind of interesting for that increased speed, so we'll see, but I think hammers and great axes are going to be very strong. We also see an increased damage of charge attacks for axes, great axes, and some colossal weapons. So that's pretty cool. Just, again, making more axes viable. I love to see that. Increase the turning speed of normal attack for the Reaper weapon type. So it sounds like you'll have better tracking with scythes, and that's very cool. I like seeing scythes become more viable. Increased damage of whips for weapon types, except for what I imagine should be the Arumi. Yeah, that's cool. The other whips were just not great, and the Arumi was pretty strong, so that's cool to see. Then we have speed of consecutive attacks getting buffed for light bows and long bows. I don't use bows much, but that's cool if you do. And then increased poise damage of torch, not a big deal. There's a buff that's to Mohg's Great Rune, which I don't know if anybody normally runs that, but that's kind of cool. And then, yeah, just some other Great Rune adjustments as well. And then making arrows a bit stronger, but not golem arrows, which is also fine. Decrease the turning speed of dual wield weapons. So, okay, so spears and great spears are not going to have as good of tracking. So that's awesome. I definitely like this change that will raise the skill ceiling for these types of weapons and potentially make them more strafeable. So if you can strafe, great spears and get a backstab, that's awesome. And would be a very welcome change again. And then decrease the poise generation speed during some attacks of the following weapon types. So great spears and halberds, cool. I'm done with that. Decrease the effects of Terra Magica and the duration of the Cerulean Hidden Tier. So I've heard people say that that's just so you can't sit there and spam and cheese bosses within just kind of like with magic spells. So that's great. We like that. And then we do see some armament adjustments. Troll's Night Sword getting some increased damage. That's cool. It's a sword you don't see used that much, so I'm down for that. Zamar Curve Sword also getting some improvements. The Forked Hatchet nobody really uses, getting some buffs. We like that. Ripple Blade not doing as much sleep or bleed buildup. I mean, just any status buildup is awesome. No more Ripple Crescent Halberd kind of cheese builds, which is great. So I think this is just plain wrong. The Serpent Hunter increased the speed of crouching attack. From what I've seen, they've decreased it and made it much more reactable. So I think that's actually a nerf to Serpent Hunter, and this is just incorrect. But which is cool to see. It's crazy fast before, so I feel like these Serpent Hunter mains will be kind of sad, but that's interesting, and from my end, totally fine. Yeah, same with the Ripple Crescent stuff. Just the status is going to be less, and then we have the Albinauric Staff, increase the attribute scaling. I don't use staffs too much, but just increasing attribute scaling, so just buffs to several staffs as well as some seals. So that's kind of cool. And then here we have some other adjustments for Ashes of War. Kick getting hyper armor. This is pretty cool. I've used it a little bit. It doesn't seem that Kick can kind of trade with great weapons, so if you try to kick into a great sword, it's not going to break their hyper armor, but I think for smaller weapons, Kick could be quite strong, and we'll see if it gets incorporated into the meta. I'd be very excited if Kick became viable. Then some nerfs to Spinning Slash, doesn't do as much build-up, which is great, and then Storm Salt, Storm Caller, Storm Stomp, those all have decreased poise generation speed. So I think that means that you don't get hyper armor on frame 1 for these, which is great. That was pretty broken. So we love to see that. And then Glintblade Phalanx, decrease the poise damage. That's great. It was very, very high. Loretta Slash, Bloody Slash, those both getting frame 1 hyper armor was problematic, so I think they've delayed that hyper armor and made them more easily poise broken faster, and giving you a window to kind of just, you can't just Loretta Slash on reaction anymore, which is great. And I know some people that will be sad about that, but that's okay. I think it's for the best. Some Bow Ashes of War is getting slightly buffed, which is cool. And then they've changed some parry stuff, so increase the parry hitbox generation speed. I think they've just made parry is a little bit more viable. They've also removed the knockdown effect on Taker's Flame and decreased the fire's poise damage, so that's pretty cool, since you do see a lot of Blasphemous Blade users out there in the wild. Moonlight Greatsword has been adjusted. I wouldn't say nerfed or buffed, but the poise damage of the magic wave has been decreased, but we do see increase to the poise damage of the heavy and charged attacks, so that's cool. I am interested to see how that works out, because Moonlight Greatsword was quite strong. Thundercloud Form decreased the poise damage. So I think I'm sad about that, because I really liked the Dragon King's Cragblade, and I believe that's the Ash of War for that. And you could kind of, on reaction, just mash with that Ash of War. So they've probably changed that, which is sad for me, but it was pretty broken. Magma Shower decreased the poise generation speed, so less hyper armor. That's cool. Decrease the damage on Thunderstorm. Makes sense. Bubble Shower, decrease the damage and poise damage. I actually was just using that in a video yesterday, so I'm sad to see that go. I feel like it was pretty balanced. Like, if you can get off Bubble Shower with the Envoy Longhorn, like, I think you deserve all the poise damage and increased damage, but this is probably for PvE, because that thing hits super hard for PvE. So I'm sad to see that for PvP, but it does make sense for PvE now that I think about it. Yeah, and just some other adjustments to other Ashes of War. You know, I think these are all good. Like, Blood Boon Ritual, decreased generations status build up, that's fine. Lord of Slash, again, poise generation speed, less early hyper armor. So yeah, and then we have a series of bug fixes. This is already going on pretty long, so if you want to go through all of these adjustments, I definitely recommend reading through them. I'll link it below, but I'd really rather jump into the gameplay. So yeah, let's take a look at some duels and invasions. Alright, so jumping into our first duel, we're going to be playing against somebody using Power Stance axes. So the Warped Axe was already pretty strong, and the Warped Axe did get a buff to its speed. So we're definitely going to be looking out for that. We're going to be worried about how fast that axe is swinging, and just try to keep in mind that we want to roll a little bit earlier. We ourselves are also using an axe, so we have an offhand hand axe that we were two-handing initially. We're hoping to get our poison proc early, so we can get the buff from the Mushroom Crown. And then we also have a main hand greatsword, which didn't get too substantially changed, but you know, we won't really feel that in this matchup because we're not going against another greatsword, but we do manage to get the victory, and I think the offhand hand axe is definitely very strong, and we'll see a lot of that. We're using a dex build here, so this isn't really arcane, but here we're just running a bleed infinity. I kind of wanted to give that a try with the, you know, the poison proc and getting the extra AR bonus there, and then we can see just the speed of the Reaper is definitely increased, the speed of the hand axe is definitely increased, and a setup like this is going to be very strong. And we can also see that Power Stance cross Naginatas are not quite as scary as they once were. So again, a welcome change. And now we switch over to a Halberd and a offhand Kiba. This was a setup I really liked to use before. I don't think either of us are running over 117 poise, so that means that the poise break for the offhand Nagakiba won't actually happen on the initial swing. So that is something to keep in mind. So we both will be able to tank one hit from the offhand Nagakiba, but our opponent here has switched over to the two-handed moveset, which is going to have guaranteed poise breaks. We go ahead, try to Ravioli step in, but manage to take a halberd hit early on. They're doing a good job of utilizing their two-handed moveset of the Nagakiba. We did get a poise break on one of those hits, but then you can see again that we didn't on another one of those Nagakiba hits, so they must have been poise chipped, which kind of makes sense out of that. Next up, we have a player that's running a halberd with a shield. So we're running a Colossal Sword here, which I think does work pretty well. It just, the Zweihander feels great in this patch, especially with kind of the changed poise chips and everything like that. So we go ahead and try to get the true combo. The combo is still true, which makes sense, just, you know, nothing was changed on that front. And then we get another hit in. We're pretty much out of stamina, so we don't go for that true combo. And then we switch over to our two-handed Nagakiba. Go for a roll catch there, don't quite grab it, but do get a jumping light attack for the finish on this player. And really what I'm just trying to do is cycle through a bunch of different weapons that either have been adjusted by this patch or something I'm curious about trying in this patch, and just kind of see where things are at. Our next opponent is going to be running Carrion Slicer, and we're just going to be trying to vortex them with our offhand hand axe and main hand halberd, and we can see here that the poise breaks on the Slicer are not very strong at all, which means we can kind of just mash with our poise breaking setup, and they get poisoned and take so much damage that the fight doesn't last very long. So, you know, next up we have a player running Shamshir, and Shamshir is definitely a setup that is still very strong. The two-handed curved sword is one that I don't believe had any adjustments to its poise damage, so it should be poise breaking on the first hit as it normally does. Unfortunately, this player goes for their Ash of War, which is Cragblade. Really not pretty necessary in my opinion, but that means that they end up eating a hit, and then we're able to finish them off with our Lance. We have this player again who's running the Power Stance Warped Axes, so we'll get to see their moveset a little bit more, and now we're running a Hammer, which does have a faster moveset than before. It was already very strong before this, but I would say Hammers are just nasty now. I also wanted to try out Storm Stomp, just because Storm Stomp no longer has frame 1 hyper armor, and just kind of see how it felt. And it feels good. You can see there, we do a lot of damage very easily. So I would say Storm Stomp is definitely something to be looking out for. It's still probably It might be banned in tournaments moving forward, as it has been in the past, but maybe not. We'll see. It's just very strong. So I would say if you're a Storm Stomp enjoyer, you don't need to be too concerned, and it pairs quite well with something like a hammer where the speed has been increased. It's hard to roll out. Next up, we have a player running the Serpent Hunter, and I was super happy to have a fight against this type of player. And you can see that crouch attack is just so slow now, so super reactable. The moveset feels very reactable. I was also running Kick, so you'll see me trying to kick into their hyper armor, and you'll see that it doesn't break their hyper armor, so that's good to know. If you're going to be using Kick, I think it's better against light weapons, and yeah, you can see there, we get hyper armor for our Kick, but they keep their hyper armor, so we're able to come out on top just because that Shunter wasn't doing a ton of damage, and the attacks were pretty reactionable. But moving on, we're going to be using the Arumi one-handed. So this player is not running a ton of poise, so I think that means that we're pretty much going to feel like we're playing the Arumi as we did in patch 110. So the poise breaks are pretty consistent. I mean, they didn't get poise broken out of the air there, so I'm not sure if they would have in patch 110, but I feel like they actually might have. So maybe the anti-air is slightly less viable in this newest patch, but I would say the Arumi still felt strong, especially against lower poise opponents. And we'll see how poise gets adjusted in terms of like how people adjust from the meta, like if we're going to see everybody running very, very high poise or not. Because I think you can kind of slide back into patch 110 with high poise. It starts to feel a little, or patch 1.09, it starts to feel a little bit like that, where your tanking hits more regularly and passive poise is more substantial. So moving on to our invasions, this one we're going to be using Power Stance large clubs. Their moveset is now faster, and even though this is on a dex build, normally I'd run a large club on a strength build, we were getting a lot of damage. Now these players didn't have a ton of HP, but it definitely felt good, being able to grab close to 500 damage there, and then get just a couple crouching attacks that come out super fast, are doing great poise breaks, and take care of that opponent. We do have a co-invader with us, but I would say I didn't super feel like we needed their help, just because this was doing crazy damage. So all three of us hit each other at the same time there, and me and the red combined did around 1100 damage, so that's pretty huge since they're not doing crazy damage with their thrusting sword. Looks like we've got another clip from the arena here. We'll be jumping back to invasions in a minute, but another large club, but this time with an offhand hand axe. And this player was using Endure, so that doesn't really help us understand the poise changes that well, but we can see great vortex potential using Storm Stomp, quite strong, getting a nice hit off with the large club out of Storm Stomp. You just have lots of blender potential. Next up we have some more large club stuff, so we're going to get a buff off early with one, and then we have Storm Stomp again on the other, and this time we're going against Claws, which did get nerfed. They don't have the true combo with the running heavy attack anymore. I would say they still, felt kind of strong to play against. We didn't have the greatest connection. That player just kind of walked through that Storm Stomp on my screen, but that's okay. We have the health advantage, and we're just kind of trying to get out damage where we can. There we get a nice anti-air with the running heavy, and they pull out PS Pikes. So I don't know if they knew that there was a patch, but both these setups have been nerfed that they're using, and we can see that it's not doing them any favors. So we do get a Storm Stomp, and unfortunately are out of stamina in that moment, but we do get a crouching attack for the finish. So we just kind of shut those kind of old meta setups down fairly easily. Next up we have a player that's also running some clubs, or actually I think those are great axes, but some great weapons that did also get their values sped up a little bit. So we can see some mashing here. I'm using the two-handed moveset, trying to shut down the one-handed moveset of my opponent. I get a nice jumping attack for about 800 damage, and then just kind of maintain priority. And that's what's so nice about this new patch, is that you can maintain priority against great weapons with your great weapon. If you have that, you know, kind of early hit, you're no longer punished by somebody just mashing out a stun and maintaining their priority while you're just kind of mashing into each other. Next up, we have an invasion here, and again we see the claws, and I would say they felt strong. We're going to be using Cestus, and this player is running very high poise, so we do kind of end up feeling that, and I wanted to see how Barbaric Roar would do if it still felt kind of broken on fists, and we get that buff off early on, and we have the option to attempt that real quick, and yes, we do like over 700 damage. We get another hit in. They're very low, and we don't want them running away, so we hit them with Thunderbolt on our offhand or our soft swap Miser Accord. So that does one player pretty fast. Here we get the poise break with the heavy attack. The light attacks are no longer guaranteed to poise break, but the heavy attack on the Cestus is quite good, and then we get a jumping attack for the finish, so the damage still felt very strong, and I was very happy to use that. Next up, we'll be running Power Stance Nagakibas. We're going to be using the two-handed moveset sometimes, and I would say these still felt great. Kibas felt amazing in the last patch. They're not quite as strong just with their poise breaks not being so high and the power stance damage getting nerfed, but they just have such good options, and the two-handed moveset is so strong. So I think that's really important to recognize, is that even if you are a power stance Kiba enjoyer, like, they're still good, and you always have the option to two-hand one of the Kibas, and it's super strong. You have access to great Ashes of War like Sword Dance or Unsheath. Sword Dance is going to get hyper armor, Unsheath is going to poise break just about everything, especially with the heavy attack. So they do feel just great. So here I was trying to see if I could land a crouching attack, and I think my opponent didn't have enough poise to not get poise broken there, but from my understanding, if they had high enough poise, that would not have poise broken. Next up, we're going to be looking at Power Stance Straight Swords, and yeah, power stance weapons still feel good. Like, power stance straight swords were pretty broken in my opinion before this patch, and now they just feel like a strong option. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. We're not fighting in like a sweaty arena environment. We're fighting a kind of random group of 3, so it's hard to know if they're, you know, out of control, but we got 1L1 and did almost 500 damage on this player. Now, are they running a Sword Seal? I don't know, but you know, we're doing damage. We're, you know, taking players out relatively easily with power stance straight swords. So I would say, like, you know, they're still strong, and they're fun to use. So I think if you're somebody that felt like they were too meta and too strong, you can maybe feel a little less guilty about running them, and just feeling like they're a strong option that you can turn to when you've got a lot of opponents and you want to use a multi-hit talisman or something. It's just, yeah, I definitely, I really like a lot of the changes that they've made in this patch, and I think they took a ton of community feedback, which is awesome. Here we can see Rain of Arrows still doing damage. The poise break, I guess, is not as high as it used to be, but you know, I did want to test kind of how Rain of Arrows felt, and yeah, I think maybe you'll one-shot people less, but honestly, like, that makes sense. If you started out an invasion by one-shotting a player with Rain of Arrows, like, it wasn't super satisfying. So, you know, that makes sense. And then if you had, you know, 2 opponents both using Rain of Arrows on you, and for some reason you didn't notice them, which you probably should if you're an invader, but sometimes it happens, and you would just get melted pretty quick. So yeah, I think it's a logical change, and one that, you know, it's kind of a long time coming, and especially with the Death Ritual Spear also getting nerfed in a similar way, I would gladly take that change. So we're also using a great weapon here. We've got a CGS pulled out. We're doing quite a bit of damage with it. We have the option to use the offhand hand axe. This player is doing a good job of getting out without getting hit, so we're going to go ahead and swap over to our heavy thrusting sword and just use Thunderbolt to finish them off, so we can aggro the host, who is just kind of casting spells. In that moment, AHTS felt just fine, but we kind of caught our opponent for a number of quick hits. So, you know, we'll see. Like, as we encounter better players in the arena and just have more one-on-one situations and try different setups, I think we'll have a lot more information, but I think it's super fun to just kind of try out the new stuff early on in these patches and get a feel for what's new, what's different, and try to just predict where things are going. So this opponent is using Power Stance Whips. The jumping attacks are poise breaking, so, you know, that's it's still a strong option in ganks, to be honest. Whips were, especially power stance whips, were always kind of a struggle to play against in patch 110 just because they take up so much space, their hitbox can be so delayed. So I think it'll be a little bit better, like the standing L1 for whips. You know, if you're tanking one of those hits, you won't get caught and blundered. So I'd like to believe that, especially running higher poise in invasions, you'll be able to get blundered a little bit less. That's the big hope for me. So back to this invasion, we do get a Thunderbolt finish on that player. They use Thunderbolt on me, so I was happy to have that opportunity. Then we get a crouch poke and then just a running heavy with the Zwei. We're doing a decent amount of damage here. Unfortunately, me and this player did not have the greatest connection. We don't quite land our jumping attack. The spacing was a little bit off. Seemed like we got some element of aim punch there, so it seems like aim punch maybe has not been completely fixed. It's possible that just like with the connection, it's, you know, in a weird spot. That was the the connection moment that I was kind of referring to earlier. Just that phantom range was absolutely massive, and that means we're one hit from death. But fortunately, I believe this was actually Genius Level who came into the world. This is somebody who's like super generous on stream, and I've just seen them in G9's chat a lot. So yeah, kind of cool to have somebody, you know, popping in, and we get the victory with their help. So yeah, that was definitely a fun one. It's always nice to have a good co-invader. Here again, we'll be running Rain of Arrows, just kind of checking on the damage, seeing if it's still strong, seeing what happens. So we don't really get a super direct hit, but you know, 300 damage just with a random Ash of War, still super nice to have in your back pocket. A good way to do some damage at range for a group of 3, and while you still have like kind of the height advantage as well. And we do get them coming in. We do have a fat rolling host, so that's a little bit unfortunate, but we're going to swap over to our Zweihander and get that offhand axe in the mix as well, and just try to buff up a little bit, drink our physic. This player really thought they were slick, but I was locked on, so they were not able to just kind of surprise me. The latency was quite high here. You can see that just with those hits against that first player, pretty bad. The frost pot hitting, and then like a full second later the effect, you know, going on to the player. So we're a little bit concerned about both of Grand Sacks. I believe that Ash of War also did get nerfed, so we go ahead, hide behind a corner, and we're good. Taker's Flame also got nerfed, so if we had gotten hit by that Ash of War from the Blasphemous Blade, we would not have taken so much damage. This player is running very low poise, so we're able to use the Heavy Thrusting Sword to just take them out, even though we're one-handing it, and it's not as strong as it used to be. For some reason, we have Chilling Mist on this HTS. I'm not totally sure, but we swapped to it, so we're committing at least for the moment. This player has some crazy phantom range. That halberd is everywhere all at once, and we're going to need to just kind of respect that a little bit, especially with the blood loss buildup. Here we switch over to a slightly more logical Heavy Thrusting Sword, one that has Thunderbolt on it and is lightning infused. We're going to go ahead and drink our blue physic there, and again, back off. We're hoping if we could just knock them out of that Ash of War with the jumping heavy with the HTS. Again, just kind of experimenting. Getting some great damage in with the running heavy, 500, and then another 400 with the Ash of War. Catching up to them again with the running heavy, and then just one more poke with a neutral attack is going to do the trick. And next up, we're going to be using a Reaper and an offhand axe, two weapons that both had speed increases and poise adjustment. So the hand axe is again going to poise break on all of its hits, which is awesome. We can kind of get some vortexes going with this setup potentially. I haven't figured out the timing exactly with it, but I think the more that I use it, the more I will like it. They're both bleed infused, and we're trying to get the poison proc if we can, because we've got the Mushroom Crown as well as the Kindred Rot Talisman. So we do end up getting that poison, and now we're kind of at regular amounts of damage with the blood infusion. So we really like to see that. We throw out another frost pot. This player is really just kind kind of swinging. We go for a running heavy and get that to connect, and then manage to roll out. We get another running heavy. We go for the off-hand axe. I mean, it's really nice to have the Reaper out in this mix because they are running a great shield, so we're going to be doing more damage through that. And we'll see that taking effect momentarily as they continue not to roll and to just try to block, but still take quite a bit of damage. So we managed to finish off that player, and now it's just a one-on-one with the host. They're skipping around a little bit, and I did notice some increased latency today. I don't know if that has to do with just like server activity or what, but it did feel like players were dropping frames a little bit more and just more latency in general. We managed to knock them out of the air and then follow it up with the sword dance and finish off that player for the victory. So overall, I'm really just enjoying this patch quite a bit. I think it's a lot of fun. But if you like this video and you want to see more Elden Ring PvP content, especially with the DLC coming, definitely please subscribe. And yeah, have a good day.